to people that may not coming forward to assist this commission because they believe it's not the right forum for certain issues. I just want to make sure that I indicate what my thoughts are about that group of people. Firstly, I think everybody in South Africa who has knowledge of matters that fall within the terms of reference of the Commission should come forward to assist the Commission and to share that information so that the Commission can do its job, which is for the country, really. But if those people happen to also include persons who serve as members of Parliament, particularly I'll refer to the National Assembly, because there are specific provisions in the Constitution that relate to the National Assembly that are, I think, relevant. To this, I think one of them is Section 48 of the National Assembly, which you probably know well because although you are in the National Assembly now, you spend a lot of time in the National Assembly. No, it's not Section 48, it's Section 42(3). Section 42(3) of the Constitution says about the National Assembly. The National Assembly is elected to represent the people and to ensure government by the people under the Constitution. And then it says, it does this by choosing the president, by providing a national forum for public consideration of issues, by passing legislation, and by scrutinizing and overseeing executive action. Which seems to suggest to me that if you are a member of the National Assembly, even though you may have been sent there by your party, once you are performing your functions as part of the National Assembly, you have got to bear in mind that the National Assembly is elected to represent the people. Therefore, the people of South Africa must come first. And then, if you go to Section 48, it talks about the oath or affirmation that gets taken by members of the National Assembly. And it says, before members of the National Assembly begin to perform their functions in the Assembly, they must swear or affirm faithfulness to the Republic and obedience to the Constitution in accordance with Schedule 2. And the oath or affirmation contained in Schedule 2 in respect of members of the National Assembly include swearing or solemnly affirming to, and I quote, be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and to obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution and all other law of the Republic, and to solemnly promise to perform his or her functions as a member of the National Assembly to the best of his or her ability. It seems to me that the oath or affirmation that members of the National Assembly take requires them to place the interests of the Republic above everything else. And to the extent that the group of people that we are talking about may include people who are members of Parliament, particularly National Assembly, who may have evidence, knowledge, or information that would be important for this commission to consider, to the extent that they might not be wanting to come to this commission because they think there is another forum that is better suited, particularly if they are thinking about a political party. It seems to me that they may be acting inconsistently with their oath as members of the National Assembly, and or affirmation that they may not be putting the interests of the Republic or of the people first, because this commission was specially set up. It's established in terms of the Constitution, Section 84 of the Constitution, to look into matters of national interest that have arisen, and is going to make recommendations to the President. So I thought I must just mention that so that no impression is created that one condones those who are not under fear of being harmed in any way physically or killed or anything, and who might not really even be fearing any victimization, but simply who might think it's not the right forum, that I think they may be acting inconsistently with the Constitution. I thought I would just mention that. You might or might not wish to say anything.
Chairperson, I'll be very brief, but perhaps if I may, if it's not indecorous, sometime when this commission is over and you want to engage with me as one South African to another, I'm happy to talk with you. But what I want to suggest also is I'm no better than anybody else. I don't want to come across as holier than thou. In fact, the very constitutional court that you serve so admirably on has pronounced on this matter, balancing our relationship as elected public representatives by parties on a PR list system and the interests of the public out there. Lest it's misunderstood, there is an ongoing on-off debate on the relationship between public representatives in the ANC on a PR list system, not a ward or constituency system, and the need to represent the public out there. My sense is, Chairperson, unless I'm wrong, this debate takes place now and then. We're moving in the direction that I think the Constitutional Court decision suggested. But Chairperson, many of these things that are in constitutions and in legislation about the responsibilities of members of Parliament to the public out there, whether in a ward elected system or a PR system, are there in laws and in constitutions even sometimes in the developed world too. It is probably true to say that many MPs don't abide by that. So it's increasingly, my sense is, without going into a long discussion, the international norm. We as members of Parliament are increasingly seen by the public out there, whether in a developed or developing world, as not responsible enough to people who elect us. People are increasingly skeptical of us. And secondly, there are specific challenges we have as the ANC in an emerging democracy, where we are committed to what we call a national democratic transformation. If one wants to use ordinary parlance, you would say a social democracy. And forging our identity in a society with such acute income and material inequalities, which are largely racialized, with an untransformed economy or very marginally transformed economy, some of these balances between your service to your party and your service to the country are very complex to thread. And may I say also, it's not just an ANC problem. The DA has a similar problem. But I'll leave it there, and perhaps if you feel up to it sometime, I'm happy to be available to you, to offer you my views and what I think are issues you might want to mull over.
Well, I would say that if you wish to share with the Commission more on these challenges that you're talking about, would welcome that. I say that because one of the things that I have said publicly, the Commission is looking at is to what extent did Parliament exercise its oversight over the executive properly? Is it a situation where Parliament might not have exercised its oversight functions properly, and that's why certain things may have happened, or if it had exercised its oversight functions the way it should, maybe certain things would have stopped before they became worse, you know. We have got to look at that. And part of looking at that is going to be when you look at members of Parliament who are members of the majority party in Parliament, to what extent do they feel free to hold the executive accountable the way it's expected of any member of Parliament? Is there room to say, because the minister is from my party, I must be careful, I mustn't be too tough on him or her? And maybe some of those might be some of the challenges that may have to be confronted to say, is there a problem here or is there no problem? The holding the executive to account is done in the same way whether a member of Parliament is a member of the majority party or not, or is the position that even members of the executive know that, well, opposition parties will talk, but the majority will be with me, so they won't bother me. You know. So those are some of the things we need to look at as the Commission, because it may well be that if we have Parliament performing its oversight functions effectively, in the future, if similar things were to arise, they would be stopped. And the question might be, what is it that is lacking that we should think of measures that should be put in place to make sure that the performance of oversight functions would be effective? So ideas that you might have about these things would be most welcome. I would welcome that, particularly because you have been in Parliament for a long time. You probably have a lot of experience even about how Parliament, how in the National Assembly oversight functions are performed, and you might be able to enlighten me quite extensively, which might be quite helpful when one comes to say, is there something that needs to be done about the performance of oversight functions to make sure that, one, the levels of corruption in the country, in the SOEs and departments, do not continue to deteriorate, to make sure that they can be brought down by the use of proper oversight functions performance.
May I just suggest very quickly?
Thank you. Yeah.
Firstly, I don't really have the authority, political authority, to speak on behalf of the Parliament.
Yes, no.
I'll respectfully decline your offer.
Yes.
But I know you want MPs to appear before the Parliament. It is appropriate for the two chief whips, and particularly National Assembly chief whip, to respond to your concerns.
Yes.
Secondly, you, Chairperson, and others here know far more than me how powerful the role of Parliament is in terms of the Constitution and a plethora of the post-1994 legislation. We have no choice in terms of law, in terms of the Constitution, to play an effective oversight role. We ourselves as the ANC, and I speak on behalf of us, the majority of us, have been saying it publicly, particularly the previous Chief Whip, Mr. Mtembo. He's on record, if I recall, and other chief whips, Mr. Max Sisulu and so on. We've repeatedly said, play our role more effectively. At the time that ESCOM appeared before a special inquiry of the Public Enterprises Committee, there were a lot of statements made by ANC MPs that if we exercised our role as effectively as the Constitution and the laws require, and more fundamentally, what our own ANC policy set out about a national democratic parliament, a people's organ. If you look, Chairperson, you are a constitutional expert. We are politicians. There is no difference between what underlies your values in what you've just said and what are in the Constitution and what we say. If you look at the period 94 to 2004, there are so many articles written, Chairperson, on a Parliament as a tribune of the people. Some of it is jargon from the pre-1994. Parliament as an organ of popular power. And it differs. Some committees, ANC-led committees obviously, have strong chairpersons and whips. The whips are like the political heads of the study group. The chair is the functional chairperson of the Parliament as a whole. Who are more experienced? They exercise very effective oversight role. Others who are new feel intimidated because often the chairperson is an ordinary member of the ANC and the minister is in a national executive committee. So if you like, in Parliament, the ordinary member is the political boss because the minister is answerable to him. But in the political party structures, the minister is the boss because he's in the NEC.
He's part of the
leadership. But I know, Chairperson, you've raised this. You've reached out to me via your commission representatives on the SAA matter, and I've cooperated. And so I think the chief whip will decide who she wants to bring to Parliament.
Yes.
But I can't decide to speak on behalf of Parliament, as you'll appreciate.
Yes. No. I wasn't inviting you to speak on behalf of Parliament or anybody. I was looking more at your own personal experiences, having been a member of Parliament over a long period. The Commission will be communicating with parliamentary structures at that level, but personal experiences of people who say, I've been there over this period, this is what I have observed, that kind of thing is what I was talking about. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Karim, before we adjourn for lunch, the issue that you were dealing with was you had just read the one set of minutes dated the 6th of June 2013, and you asked that you would like to refer to one or two others. You may take it that, as you know, the chairperson has read your entire affidavit together with all the annexures. So if you could just be very brief and make reference to the one that you would like to draw the attention of the chair to.
Chairperson, I'm not going to read the minutes.
Yes.
But lest it be seen that I'm speaking in generalities, like a typical politician.
Yeah.
When Ms. Geldenhuys gave the Commission her affidavit, she attached the minutes. And my affidavit was written before that. I had no idea how on the ball, as it were, the affidavit was. And I'll simply refer to the page numbers and summarize them. But the actual minutes will take too long to read.
Yes.
So if one looks at 95 in Teresa Geldenhuys's CC32 file,
I beg your pardon, Chair. The exhibit, that is exhibit CC43.
With CC43, sorry.
I don't think that has been handed up to you yet.
That has not been handed up.
No, Chair. No,
Okay,
no, not
all
yet.
right.
Thank you, Chair. CC exhibit.
That's in exhibit
CC40.
CC43 and
That's
what
correct.
page? 95.
Well, I have, I'm afraid, CC32. It says SABC reference bundle.
Oh,
And that is on page 95. But what might help the committee, since we're not
Yes.
going to read it,
Yes.
it's just like, as
Yeah.
lawyers would argue, heads of argument.
yes, yeah.
Just
yeah.
to
You can
for
speak
future,
to
and
it
so that,
as
you know,
long
the-
as we know where
yeah,
to find them.
It doesn't seem as if I'm speaking generalities.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I'll deal with the date. It's the
Yes.
12th of June. 2nd of July 2013.
Yes.
This is the Special Finance, Investment, Procurement and Technology Committee meeting.
Section Chair would find that at page 38 of CC43.
Meantime, I've been given exhibit CC32, which
So have I.
he has.
In that case, it's page 95.
Yeah,
Yes,
95 in red, yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Chairperson, this is the day before the MultiChoice SABC agreement is signed. That happened on the 3rd of July by Mr. Motsuneng. Right. So, on page 2 of the minutes of 2nd of July, it is clear that there's no approval for STB control. On page 3, it's noticeable that Ms. Lulama Mokobo, who is the GCEO, is not there. And it was agreed that the reference to clause 9 in the text of the discussion should be removed. It was decided that there were 3 conditions, as I know it in these minutes, that were set for Mr. Motsuneng to sign. The first was to seek senior legal opinion on whether the MultiChoice SABC deal is legally tenable. That was on the 2nd of July. That was the first condition, if I recall it. The second condition, as I recall it, was that there should be board, well, there's no board approval. The second condition is that Mr. Motsuneng, who's the acting CEO, can go ahead and sign the agreement. However, as Mr. Harris pointed out to me, and I think he's right, there is no possibility in corporate law for a subcommittee of a board to change the delegations from a GCEO to an acting, moreover acting, COO. That, he says, and it seems reasonable to me, can only be done by a board. So the second problem with the committee deciding is that it can't just willy-nilly change delegations. There's no power. It could only have gone to a committee. The third is that Mr. Mavuso is constantly arguing against having clause 9.
And he's the chairperson.
He's the chair of that committee.
Yes.
Ms. Zandile Shabalala came in late to that meeting, as I understand it, right? But Mr. Mavuso makes it very clear at the end that any agreement with MultiChoice must be, to use his words, on SABC terms. Now, it's very clear, Chairperson, that no legal opinion was secured between this meeting on the morning of the 2nd of July and the signing of the agreement on the 3rd of July. Indeed, Chairperson, if you go to the 30th of July, there is, in fact, a legal opinion offered. So the legal opinion is offered, if my arithmetic serves me, 28 days after. And you will see later, Chairperson, that Mr. Krish Naidu, a human rights lawyer, who's got a strong struggle history, was serving on the board. He did, and he's given the commission, I think, an affidavit in that regard, an assessment of the legality of it, and concluded it was ultra vires and null and void. But subsequent to that, I gathered, there was a further legal opinion secured by Ms. Zandile Shabalala, which said it was legally tenable. And I think it's then that an 8-6 majority decided to approve the deal, as it were, the agreement with SABC MultiChoice agreement, some 14 months later. Now, if you go, Chairperson, to the transcripts of the board meeting, it's TGH as I have it,
Yes.
July 22nd, Chairperson, on page 2. Mr. Sipho Masinga, the head of technology at the time, who was removed by all accounts because he insisted on STB control, and Mr. Motswaneng, it is alleged, removed him because of that. And that seems to have partly played a role also in the removal of Mokobo, but she'll speak for herself. But anyway, the 22nd of July, on page 2, Mr. Sipho Masinga says very revealingly, it's the SABC that put control in the policy, the government policy of 2008 passed by Cabinet. He says, SABC put control in the policy to defend its interest. Set-top box is a principle, to quote his words. So, you've got Ms. Mokobo saying that there is an argument by MultiChoice in particular, and those who sympathize with it, that we don't need set-top boxes. Because you see, the future, you're going to get what we call integrated digital television, where, Chairperson, you and I have such a TV, you may not know it, where you can actually do a whole lot of things that a computer can do. But the Department of Communications and the Ministry was clear that most people in this country can barely afford a TV. Still less are they going to have the capacity to buy an integrated digital TV. If you speak to Mr. Kruger, he'll tell you that even with the ID TV, if I understand him correctly, you'll still need a set-top box set-top box control system. And in fact, elsewhere in the memorandum, I asked him in preparation for this meeting, Roy, are they correct that you don't need set-top boxes? And he's given his explanation. He says set-top boxes are even more important now than they were then, and he explains why. He says encryption is involved in a whole lot of services, WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, and so on and so on. He himself is involved, bizarrely, in Mozambique, where his company has inserted now in a poor country like Mozambique.
And he says they have done digital migration much quicker there.
Yes, yes, quite, and it's got control. So, in short, he says, in the end of his affidavit, his comment, so much for MultiChoice's view that set-top box control is outdated. Mr. Becker also said that as recently as December 2017. So that's Mr. Kruger. I'm no expert. It's for the Commission to decide. On the 30th of July, you see very clearly in the minutes the different views on set-top box control. Now this, sir, is how many days? It's 28 days beyond. 27 days beyond the signing, and 28 days beyond a committee which didn't have the power to make the decisions it did.
Thank you.
Then,
Thank you, Ms. Karim. Without going through all the minutes, the point that you're making is that those who signed the agreement had no authority, and your case, in fact, what you're placing before the Commission is that there was no board approval for them to sign that agreement. Is that correct?
the minutes.
From the minutes, yes, thank you. Let's move
you can keep your mic on, Mr. Karim. Yeah, just
sorry,
keep it
yes,
on.
thank you very much. And you have given us a list of those minutes that you say you have had a look at, which don't show that they were the approvals. Now, you have spoken about the role of Mr. Becker. Let's move on to your affidavit, because I know that you had said that you can't, you have to leave today. Your flight is later today. So we just have to try and move a bit quicker. You have dealt with your interactions with Mr. Becker. Could you just tell the chairperson what were your meetings about? You've had meetings with him, and that you start with that from paragraph 135, and that will be at page 43. Could you just briefly tell the chairperson where you met him? Why did you meet with him?
Yes, Chairperson, I'll be very brief. I think the advocate is getting rightly impatient.
No.
It's all there.
No,
I have indicated that because of budget tomorrow, it's budget day,
yes.
I can't be here, but I'm available next week and so on.
we,
all right, so I'll go quickly.
Actually, I can tell you that I had said to Ms. Norman, there is no reason why we should take the whole day on your affidavit.
Yes.
Because although it's quite extensive, 80 pages, I think that the things that I'm really interested in maybe taking around about 40 pages or thereabout. The others are important to you for purposes of how this whole thing evolved. But I had said we should be able to finish earlier than we have. But there have been much to talk about.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, paragraph 135, I simply say that Mr. Patel asked me to meet Mr. Becker, and I did around the September 2nd or 3rd in Cape Town. Now, Mr. Becker obviously had served on various government panels, including President Mbeki's advisory panel, and obviously he's done considerably well, and his company has. I mean, from a neolith of the apartheid era to the 3rd largest media industry. I mean, that's remarkable. And as South Africans, we should in our own way be proud of that. They play a very crucial role in the economy. They are the biggest player in the JSE, and I deal with how good they did. But at the same time, it flowed from that Mr. Becker seemed to feel that what's good for Naspers is good for the country. No matter how brilliant he is, no person, in my view. And when I deal later with regulatory capture, I picked that up. Then we had the first meeting where his primary preoccupation was to tell me that the set-top box control policy of the government is a big folly. It's unnecessary, it's outdated. And he seemed to want to advise me on these matters, and he was very dismissive of the facilitation process by the independent facilitators. 137, but I kept the door open to him because he's a very important man in the broadcasting sector and the media sector. We agreed we'd meet again and talk more about broadband. That never came to be. When the facilitation process reached an impasse, various people, cabinet ministers senior to me, people in the industry, the chairperson of the portfolio committee in Parliament, all said, go and meet Mr. Becker. He will undo the logjam if anybody does. They said it's not worthwhile pursuing it, Mr. Imtiaz Patel or Mr. Nono Letele, that the real power that be is Mr. Becker. So we arranged such a meeting. That occurred in March 2014.
And you deal with that at page
sorry,
44?
sir, it's on page 44,
Paragraph
142.
Yes.
So that occurred in March 2014 here in Swane, at least in Swane. And Mr. Patel was very keen that we have this meeting. He said that Mr. Koos Becker will think out of the box. And Mr. Becker respected a particular minister, so the minister was also present. Now, originally, Mr. Becker focused on how powerful Naspers is, how much they contribute to the tax revenue of this country, and they do, and they treat it very well all over the world, but they seem in South Africa to have icy reception from their own country. 144, what happens is at some stage I told him, Mr. Becker, you have to allow for competition. It's untenable. 98% of pay TV. There's no transformation. So at one stage, to my surprise, he said to me, well, give me two or three names of black people you think I should, encourage to compete. To which I said, we can't. You can't choose your own competitors, and nor can a minister decide. It's policies and regulations that will. And I also pointed out to him, or I may have then, or subsequently to others in MultiChoice and Naspers, that they got the sole license, I think in 1988, to launch Mnet. And I read in an article, though I don't know if it's true, that they were also given some financial support that may or may not be true by the government of the time. But they were very close to the National Party. They had a heads-up start. They were far ahead of anybody else. I suggested to Mr. Becker then that, look, even if you have a competitor, it's going to take a very long time, Mr. Becker, for this competitor to really be a real competitor. But he wouldn't have it. And at some stage, the meeting got very frosty because he kept repeating. He stopped me making my presentation on why we went for control, which is set out in the, and he was dismissive, and he stopped me and he told me this is all nonsense and the DTI doesn't know what it's doing and so on. And then he said that, Minister, something to this effect, you speak the language of ETV. Now this came after a telephonic exchange with him. This is March 2014, in December 2013, when I found him to try to get him to come to a meeting with me to try to find some sort of compromise and to complain to him that people in MultiChoice and SABC were going about saying that I'm in the power of ETV, which is what he exactly said, and that I'm corrupt and so on. And I told him that's outrageous. At some stage, there's an article by Mr. Lloyd Gates somewhere in Mail and Guardian where I told him, I asked Mr. Becker, as I remember it, look, man, what will I do? I'm so overpaid as a minister. What am I going to do with the money? How many novels am I going to buy? His reply to me was very unsympathetic. He said, "Tell me, Minister." Moreover, he seemed to know exactly what happens in SABC board meetings, which are meant to be closed meetings. He seemed to know very much what was happening, and he was unsympathetic. So let's go to 146, where Mr. Becker again accused me of like speaking the language of ETV. So, Chairperson, I have many weaknesses. I'm human. And I think it was indecorous, but I swore him. The meeting got very heated. It was not correct to swear him. It's not decorous. But, Chairperson, it's human. I was fed up with him not repeating this thing. And this is the currency out there amongst the people who didn't want control. You know, Chairperson, I told him at one stage, I give a lot of my money away. I drive a 2001 Toyota Corolla in 2014. I drive a 2005 Scenic. What will I do with the money? So, Chairperson, I'm sorry, my sensibilities are very trodden on. So I swore him, which I regret, but can I move on then to...
Yes.
I asked him, can you give me information, evidence that I speak the language of ETV? Secondly, can you in fact show me which statements I've issued that are drafted by ETV? It's not forthcoming even up till now. I asked Mr. Nono Letele to deliver that in my 14th of February 2018. I would like this commission, if it's possible, to get the evidence. Where's the evidence? Yes. Okay, then the next thing in late 2014, well, I'll drop that, it's not really necessary.
Yes. Well, would it be correct to say your interactions with Mr. Becker and basically with MultiChoice, NASPA's personalities, gave you the impression, and that's what I'm reading in your, I get this, the impression I get from your affidavit, that what they were about was to prevent effective competition from being allowed.
Absolutely.
They were dominating the market.
Yes.
And they were doing whatever they could to avoid competition happening.
Absolutely, Chairperson.
Yes. Okay.
As I've said, with Mr. Becker, it seemed almost like a primitive defense of territory or turf. He was the one that first introduced pay TV with his colleagues. He wasn't going to allow any upstart to come into his turf. It wasn't just a defense of profits. I've said that publicly, and it's there in the text.
So I'm just mentioning that because that might really cover your interactions with them.
Yes.
But having said that, there may be important things you want to highlight in regard to your entire interactions with them, then maybe you can highlight those.
Yes. Well, that comes later, and Ms. Norman will guide us. But I refer to, for example, well, Chairperson, you know, before you are a set of emails that we call the NAMAC emails. Strictly speaking, it's the Keith Tabo, Vijay Pandey wing of NAMAC. Those emails have been in the public domain. They are quoted in the very article that I referred to in the Mail and Guardian. They are quoted in other articles. They've been circulating since 2015, Chairperson. Up till today, nobody from MultiChoice has challenged the veracity of those emails. And you have the means, like you've done with the so-called Gupta emails, to check on its veracity. I want to say before it's misunderstood, and I think in fairness to me and the lawyer, Peter Harris, I was told by Mr. Nedri about 5 or 6 months after the Mail and Guardian article appeared that there are these emails, he said to me, Yunus, and he said, I can pass it on to you. I think he said, do you want to look at it? So I said to Mr. Nedri, what is there that I don't already know? And he said to me, yeah, and we passed on. I moved on. I was in finance, and that's a lot of work, and I got 1,000 other things to do. So when I first prepared my affidavit, I did alert Mr. Harris that there are some of these issues like this NAMAC emails. They're there somewhere. I don't have them. And we didn't pay much attention to it. But 10 days ago or so, before the commission, we met with the commission, and we tabled it and said, do you want these emails? They said, yes. So Mr. Nedri made it available. Personally, I only saw it for the first time on Friday, last week, when I got the bundle from Teresa Feldenes. I read it. I was taken aback as to how much those emails, if they are valid, and up till now they've never been challenged by NAMAC or indeed by Mr. Becker and MultiChoice and NASPAS, if they are valid, Chairperson, you can even throw my affidavit away, frankly. Just look at those emails. It's astonishing, the collusion between MultiChoice, Mr. Becker's mentioned twice, and so on. The collusion between MultiChoice, the Kitabo Vijay Pandey wing of NAMAC, what we call the MultiChoice wing of NAMAC, as against the Adil Inchabileng, Professor Kunene wing. I don't think you need my affidavit, really. Yes. So Mr. Koos Becker and his team come out there very clearly. I hope at some stage the Commission will find itself, because that is more powerful than anything I've said.
Yes. Thank you. Chair, may just mention that those have been submitted to the Commission, but they are being authenticated before they can be led as evidence before you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That then takes care, actually, Mr. Karim, of what you deal with in the NAMEC issues. That would be from paragraphs 226 to 242. But what is left, really, is you've covered everything about MultiChoice and its dominance in the industry and the influence that you say it had on the policy itself, which is key to the work of the Commission. The last issue really is what you deal with, which is really, these other matters are really personal matters between you and MultiChoice, and as we have discussed in consultation, that I don't think they should dominate your evidence and before the Commission. Lastly, then, in conclusion, you've made reference to what Mr. Roy Kruger said about the STB boxes and their relevance, and in conclusion, then you make the case about regulatory capture. And at paragraph 278, you make certain conclusions about who benefited from the entire policy as you deal with it. If you may take it, page 79 of your affidavit, paragraph 278. Yes. Could you just testify to what you say there?
The specific paragraph is, I'm on page 79. Paragraph, madam?
Yes, I beg your pardon, sorry. Linked to that, what I was just saying now, could you just start from page, go to paragraph 187.
187.
Yes, at page 57, it will be linked to that conclusion that you make at 278.
What precisely do you want me to deal with?
Yes, 187.
Ah, yes. Okay, so perhaps I can offer my own opinion. It wasn't a personal conflict between MultiChoice and me. I was only in that situation because I was a minister. I don't know these people. I've never met Mr. Koos Becker before I played this role. I met him just fleetingly once on a plane. I don't know him. So it was political, and I was representing the ANC, I insist, and the government. And so, but what I mean by personal is to target me specifically and to demean me. They waged a whole campaign. There's a war room that was set up. Ms. Clarissa Mack actually was leading this war room and so on. They had a special task team in media to focus on me. What could they find? There's nothing. I have many mistakes, but certainly I'm not corrupt.
Am I reading your affidavit correctly? Namely that the only reason they attacked you personally in this way, as far as you are concerned, is because they didn't like the policy position that you were pursuing as minister. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was not because of anything arising out of your personal interactions with them. It was arising out of you performing your job as you understood it.
Yes, exactly. In fact, if I recall correctly, when Mr. Koos Becker met me in September 2013 in Cape Town, he said, you know, we checked you out, Minister, as they would do, and we spoke to many people. And I know certainly one of the people they spoke with, because he told me about it. And he says, all of them say you're a very honest guy. Now, from that to being accused of, in that advert of March 2014, serving ETV interests, but beyond that, the scurrilous campaign against me, which hurts. There's nothing wrong in being hurt when you're accused of corruption and there's no case for it. It's outrageous from people who you'll see from the emails do things that you as a judge will probably decide on, border on complete irregularity. There are also tax issues that arise there. I chair the Finance Committee for the last 5 years on the NA and now in the NCOP. I don't know for a fact. You will get lawyers and expert opinions, but there are questions about tax issues that NAMAC and MultiChoice may have to answer for. But that's for you to decide, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Right, so you want me to read
187?
Yeah,
Yes.
you see, there's something very bizarre, actually, almost surrealistic, Chairperson. So when I become minister, Mr. Motswaneng, look, I had to reach out to Mr. Motswaneng because the public view was that he's very influential on the SABC, but he's also very politically connected. Everybody, well, people in the media saw it that way, and when I got appointed, people said, look, manage him. So I did reach out to him, Ms. Norman, at times, and said, I want to talk to you, because I knew getting STB control going would require his support and the chairperson, Sandile Shabalala. So I asked to see him, but he also was constantly reaching out to me. Now, it was quite odd, because he seemed to see himself almost like as the interlocutor between the president and me. May I just read to you? Between the president and me.
Yes.
Perhaps I should just read the text, okay?
Yes, read it.
Swiftly.
Yeah.
So 187, Ms. Norman, it also became clear shortly after I became Minister of Communication that Mr. Motswaneng saw himself as some sort of interlocutor between the president and me. And as the debate over the STB control matter escalated, he told me on several occasions that Ubaba, meaning the president, would not or did not agree that there should be STB control. Ms. Shabalala also asked me several times if the president agreed with me, implying that he did not. I pointed out to them that the president presided over the ANC and the country when the December 2012 ANC conference took the relevant decisions on competition in the pay TV sector. The ANC NEC Communications Committee had expressed its support for STB control. The cabinet took that decision on 4th December 2013, and also that I had briefed him on the policy before taking it to the cabinet committee. I made it very clear to Mr. Motswaneng that when I was appointed a minister, I was not told by President Zuma that I had to answer to Mr. Motswaneng. I remain, Chairperson, astonished at Mr. Motswaneng's sense of propriety. I then go on to say that basically I briefed the president. From what I could tell in a 40-minute exchange, that's before I took it to cabinet, he agreed with what I was saying. He didn't disagree with it. So subsequently, they went around saying I misled the president. So I want to deal with that, President, because that's dishonest and outrageous. I mean, I'm a minister appointed by him, so I just would like to leave that, put it on record. I had briefed the president, paragraph 190, at some length on the BDM policy, that's the broadcast digital mobility, that was adopted on 4th December 2013 before it was taken to a cabinet committee. He agreed with the approach set out. It is possible that he may have misunderstood me, Chairperson, but Mr. Motswaneng and Ms. Shabalala went about saying that I had misled the president. It would make no sense for me to do this. That would be no benefit to me at all. Also, in my engagements with senior ministers and other ANC leaders, there was unanimous support for the policy. So why would I need to mislead the president? They also said that ETV drafted the policy. President, I used the information, a chairperson from the facilitation committee. I read very widely. I had this excellent team of advisors, privileged to have them. One morning, I just popped into my head. I got up in the morning, you know, we percolate in our unconscious. And suddenly one morning in Swane, in Barrington Estate, I remember I got up and suddenly thought, you know what, let's settle it like this. And I've already explained the policy to you. A compromise. Those who want control can have it, but they've got to pay. Those who want control can not have it, and the manufacturing sector defended, and the other objectives. So I literally drafted the cabinet memo. Ms. Rosie Sekese helped with notes, so did Mr. Kruger and others, the team I mentioned, Wanda and Mr. Nidri and so on. But I drafted it. It's actually written by me. So it's nonsensical that ETV did it. And if they said so, obviously I say later, then it's just a lie. But I don't know whether they said it.
Thank you. Could I just take you back again, just one paragraph which is very important, which we omitted, at page 42, paragraph 131.
Yes.
Where you deal with Gupta leaks, how MultiChoice paid the Guptas millions.
Yes.
Could you just deal with that paragraph, please?
Yes, obviously I don't have these emails, you seem to do, but in any case I say in a News 24 media article dated 24th November 2017 titled Gupta Leaks, How MultiChoice Paid the Gupta Millions, Miss Mack, that's Clarissa Mack, the person dealing on behalf of MultiChoice on regulatory and government matters. I think she's since resigned. Is alleged to have drafted a crucial government document on the relocation of broadcasting policy powers to the newly created separate Ministry and Department of Communications. As stated above, Ms. Mack and Mr. Patel were the lead negotiators for MultiChoice in the STV control negotiations. The media article is attached as Annexure 11, and it states the following, and I quote, MultiChoice executive Clarissa Mack, of course, who had since resigned, it says, yes, sent policy documents directly to Mutambi, that's the minister, who shared them with Gupta Lieutenant Ashu Chwala. I think he's the person mentioned in the earlier emails when Mr. Matsoneng's PA was here, setting out proposals for Zuma to transfer broadcasting powers to Mutambi after he split the Communications Portfolio Committee into two departments in 2014. Chairperson, there's something else that I need to draw to the attention. All over the world, the International Telecommunication says you should converge. Our ICT Green Paper adopted in December 2013 also called for convergence. Basically, this means that whereas previously we had a separate post office, a separate television, and so on, now your very simple cell phone, you can watch video on demand, you can actually see movies. You can watch TV, you can watch the news. You can actually send messages that you otherwise would have sent to the post office via emails and so on. So it's convergence. In our entire green paper, we visited all 9 provinces. We had a major national consultative conference called for convergence. It was very surprising against the global trend and against the ICT green paper where the departments became split into 2 ministries and 2 departments. So it's about transferring powers. And there was a tussle, as you know, in public domain between Minister Kwele and Minister Mutambi about where the broadcast digital migration policy belongs. Must it belong to Minister Mutambi or the Minister of Telecommunications Postal? So that's the reference here. It's astonishing that somebody outside with a vested material and profit interest could actually draft or contribute in this way to drafting a cabinet memo on the division of powers which resides with the presidency. Moreover, if, as Ms. Mack has said elsewhere, or MultiChoice says, she was merely making a submission, then presumably other people should also be entitled to make a submission or in the sector, because they're a private sector company. Here again is an example of regulatory capture. The entire affidavit, if you like, one of its main sub-themes is precisely your concern about state capture, a specific form of regulatory capture. And if you look at those emails, which I hope you will get to do as a commission sometime, you will see it very evocatively and very starkly there. May I also say that I have no personal objection, and who cares what I think in a powerful ANC and government where I'm a marginal player, to lobbying. Chairperson, lobbying by business is exactly correct in a democracy. If the trade unions can lobby and the NGOs can lobby government, so must in fact business. That's perfectly normal. It's endemic in a democracy. The question, however, is where do the boundaries begin and end? We are a civilized, non-racial social democracy. We must be bound by the norms of the Constitution. Nowhere, Chairperson, in law or in the Constitution, does it say that MultiChoice could have done what it actually did? And those emails will be the most stark illustration of how irregular and how unfortunate it would seem their behavior was.
Thank you. And you make a statement in paragraph 133?
Yes.
Okay, next page.
The influence of MultiChoice in drafting a policy for government which is thereafter transmitted to the Guptas is irregular. That's putting it mildly.
Yes. Thank you. And then now I think we can go back to where we were, paragraph 7, the last paragraph of 278 of your statement.
278.
We've covered the main areas.
Yes, you want me to summarize that? Or
Yes,
basically,
please.
278, Chairperson, on page 79 reads, it is only NASPERS and MultiChoice that have benefited from this change in policy by Minister Mutambi, even though they are increasingly challenged by streaming services they still retain their stranglehold and domination of the pay TV sector at huge cost to the economy and the country, especially the poor and disadvantaged. Previously, as stated earlier, they did this through their close links to the apartheid government. Now they do so through the frailties of those of us elected to government and the inertia of our democratic state. But moreover, 279 concludes by saying, but we cannot allow this, Chairperson. We waged a titanic struggle over decades at a huge cost against apartheid, and we finally triumphed over it through an unprecedented negotiated transfer of power. Of course, the legacy of apartheid persists. There are many problems that we have inflicted on ourselves, and the transition still has a long way to go. But we can and must, over time, triumph over our current challenges. As one of many aspects of this transition, we need to accelerate the digital migration process as part of transforming our country in the interests of all the people, particularly the poor and disadvantaged. And we need to do this soon. Otherwise, the fourth industrial revolution will leave us far behind, to the detriment of all our people, not just the poor and disadvantaged. Chairperson, if we complete the digital migration process, what is revealed in the first 30 pages, you get a digital dividend, which means, Chairperson, to put it crudely from a politician. You see, let me put it like this, as simple as it can be. Of course, the technocrats, the technical, you see, if you take SABC 1, it uses, let's say, 1 radio frequency spectrum, to crudify it, right? On an analog, which is the current system. Once you move to digital, Mr. Kruger and others will tell you, 1 radio frequency spectrum can give you between 6, I think, and 15 television services. So the amount of radio frequency spectrum, which is a scarce source, that is used up with the current a sort of atavistic, or what can you say, backward, outdated analog television system, you'll release so much of spectrum that you can produce more channels in different languages if you had the resources to do so. You'll encourage more competition, pay TV will get cheaper, more people will have access to it. But secondly, very importantly, Chairperson, this is not, as I tried to suggest to you, only about broadcasting. You're going to release radio frequency spectrum for all the service providers in the mobile sector. So Vodacom, Cell C, MTN, Telkom Mobile. That will mean, you see, when we as government, as ANC, attack the high cost of data, of course, we are right to do that. Because if you need a knowledge economy, an information society, if you want to reach the rural poor, if you want them to enter the market, the economy, with little projects and little self-help employment schemes and little SMMEs, you need data pervasively available. The cost is prohibitive. So you've got also a very vital source of revenue. You can ask National Treasury. It's worth billions of rands, releasing the spectrum, which is now on the agenda, Chairperson, with the new minister. But obviously, the crucial part of the spectrum, if I understand this correctly, an expert will help you more in this regard, can only be offered when the digital migration process is complete. So where are we, Chairperson? Regrettably, that's why I apologize to my colleagues, my officials in the department and experts who help me as a politician. Politicians, we have thick skins. Otherwise, you can't be a politician. But officials, they should serve the public out there. They must be neutral and implement policies that the ministers and cabinet and the majority party in consultation with minority parties decide. So what I'm saying in short is, my understanding is, and I could be wrong, the set-top boxes that were released after the last tender, after I left, are dormant. Apparently they're lying, I don't know, in various warehouses. I don't know where it is. But the digital migration process, regrettably, but I have confidence in this new minister for what it's worth. I think she's going to get it going, and the president and government. They've been raising the spectrum issue. But we have been held back ultimately by MultiChoice and NASPers in particular. Secondly, I want to make something clear. It is not as if those who identified with MultiChoice and NASPers in particular did so and were used by NASPers and MultiChoice. No. They also had their own personal, business, and other material interests. People in Axter, community TV, What has community TV got to do with the issue of digital migration? They were hidebound to NASPIS and MultiChoice, who threatened them that if, I'm told, if you support encryption, we will dispose of you in the MultiChoice bouquet, DSTV bouquet. But some of them reached out to the advisors and myself and said, look, Mr. We don't have a view on this thing. It doesn't affect us. If you can fund us as the ministry, one of them approached me, we will support encryption. I say, no, then I'm buying you, my friend. No, that's equally wrong as MultiChoice's behavior. You have in this affidavit, you have, can I just read what Mr. Yunus Sheikh sent me? Look at the bullying by MultiChoice.
That's right, yeah.
Yes.
Can you help me, Ms. Norman? There's
Yes,
an email by
I'll find it
Mr.
now.
Yunus Sheikh
Yeah.
of ETV, where he says they've actually been issued. That's another example of regulatory
Yeah, you referred to it earlier, but
Yes, sure.
I want
let's
to
go
read
to
it
it
literally.
so you can read
These are
it, yeah.
Mr. Yunus Sheikh's words.
Yes.
Yes.
It's an email sent to me. Now, maybe, Ms. Norman, you can help
Yes,
me. Or-
I'm just.
I'll look for it quickly in
it's
my
a
own
page,
notes.
Issue, page
What?
41.
Page 41, yes?
Referred to is Annexure 8. Thank you.
Annexure 8.
8,
But
number
on
8,
page
Chair.
41, I literally quoted.
It will
So
be
it's
page
easier.
118.
Yes. Do you want to read it from where you quoted?
Yes.
If that's,
Okay, so paragraph 127, sir.
yeah.
Yes.
Right. It's on page 41 of my text.
Yes.
I say, in addition, just as the facilitation process was beginning, Mr. Yunus Sheikh, an ETV executive director, wrote on 5th September 2013 to inform me that NASPIS MultiChoice threatened to punish ETV if they argued in favor of STB control in the facilitation process. A copy of Mr. Sheikh's email is attached here to as Annexure 8. And it stated the following. Then I literally quote the email, which you have as an annexure. I'll read it to you. This is Mr. Yunus Sheikh's words, addressed to me. We draw to your attention the following. 1, we have been advised this day, that will be 5th September 2013, by DSTV, that if we should express support for the BDM policy and set-top box control during the course of the facilitation process, they will cancel the contract with ETV to host the ENCA news channel on the DSTV platform. In addition, we have been handed a script, no chairperson, handed a script by DSTV, which we are called upon to articulate, notice, in parrot fashion, to the facilitators you have appointed. Point 2, in addition, we've been informed by Schlaudi of SABC that they intend to oppose the BDM policy and set-top box control. We understand they too may well have been issued with a similar script and have elected to succumb, lest they suffer similar consequences with regard to their new 24 hours news channel. The declaration of DSTV, issued by no less, notice chairperson, issued by no less than its CEO, Mr. Koos Becker, to our CEO, Marcel Golding, is at once designed to place us under duress and undermine the BDM policy and the facilitation process. In our view, the facilitation process has been violated and the participants placed under considerable duress to oppose the BDM policy and set-top box control. For this reason, we are of the view, subject to your advice, that we should withdraw from the facilitation process altogether. As the process is conducted under the aegis of the ministry, we should want to hear from you before we make a final determination of the matter. In subsequent paragraphs here, to summarize, I handed it over to Mr. Nidri.
Yes.
He then took it to Mr. Harris and the facilitation team. They met with both sides and they brought ETV back in.
Yes.
Let me also just read to you the paragraph preceding that's linked to it, where it shows again regulatory capture. Paragraph 126 read, it has been alleged that NASPIS MultiChoice assisted Keith Thabo, the former president of NAMEC, to draft an opinion piece in his name. An article in the Mail and Guardian dated 29 May 2015, Annexure 5 states the following, open quotes, Amabungane has also learned that at about the same time, MultiChoice's management was involved in producing an opinion piece published in April last year that attacked Karim. The article was published under the byline of Keith Thabo, the then president of NAMEC. It is an important lobby group for mainly black, small, medium, and micro enterprises in the electronic manufacturing sector. Amabungana has seen the email correspondence from April 21 last year, that's presumably 2014, between Calvo Mavela, the head of Stakeholder and Regulatory Affairs for MultiChoice South Africa, and Thabo, referring to Mavela's role in penning an opinion piece published on the technology website, Tech Central, on the same day. In the email, writes Mavela, herewith the final article as requested. He then provides Thabo with the email address of Tech Central editor Duncan McLeod, saying, I think, try to get it to him as soon as possible, close quotes. The article entitled, Minister, you are misleading the public, accuses Karim of rewriting history and distorting facts. MultiChoice described the allegation that it was involved in authoring opinion pieces for NAMEC insulting. Through its office bearers, on the next page, 41, NAMEC asked Mr. Mavela's input. This is a quote, from Jackie Rakitla, who is the MultiChoice spokesperson. She claims, through its office bearers, NAMEC approached Mr. Mavela to provide an input as a broadcasting engineer, and he shared his thoughts based on his expert knowledge of the broadcasting sector. This is in the public domain. It's from those emails that you have. But let me put something to you, Chairperson. It's obvious. Mr. Keith Thabo doesn't even know the email address of Duncan Leod. He's given it by Mr. Mavela. Moreover, Mr. Mavela says, try to get it to him as soon as possible. It's just merely an editing. Secondly, the emails will reveal there was far, far more than just this role that Mr. Mavela played. I was surprised when I saw the emails on Friday night at the extent to which there was collusion. Act South Africa is mentioned there, Mr. McKenzie is mentioned there, and so on and so on. I won't say more because you're still authenticating.
Yes, that's
Thank
fine.
You. Lastly, you have mentioned Mr. Mawela, and you did mention that you got an apology from MultiChoice at some stage. Could you go to page 200, I beg your pardon, page 71, paragraph 253? Your counsel has asked that I ask you to deal with that paragraph. Thank you.
Yes, let me explain the context quickly, Chairperson. So, the Business Day contacts me one day, out of the blue. They say the 6th of June, as we now know it, 2013, emails have been released in the public. I think it emerged from Mr. Vincent Smith's portfolio committee on the SABC matters. And she asked me whether I'm aware that MultiChoice made it, to quote Imtiaz Patel's words, a deal breaker, this whole issue of control. And we know they waged a campaign against you and so on. So I explained to her it's not the norm for a minister to comment. Is there anything in the minutes that attacks my integrity? Because in that case, there's nothing in government norms and policies and rules or in the ANC rules to say you must sacrifice your personal and political integrity for the sake of what? What? There's no such thing in the NDR, National Democratic Republic. I don't know of any such norm. I said, if there's an attack on my integrity, I will respond. But otherwise, contact the minister and the chairperson of the committee. The journalist came back to me and said, I think she spoke to a news editor. We said, no, we can't ask them because they weren't there at the time. As it happened, neither was I. But it's a reference to a policy that relates to my period and what she presumed to be the reason partly for my not being reappointed. Now, I responded to her, chairperson, and not realizing it's such a big story, because I was busy with my work and she was irritating me, with due respect, but you know, I'm a journalist. I mean, I can't be dismissive. She meant well. So there it is. Next day, it's on page 1 of Business Day. And the next thing I find, it got viral because you see, MultiChoice is a world body. And people phone me from Reuters and I don't know what and so on. I went to ETV again because I had 3 requests for interviews at the same time. ETV, ENCA as it called, ANN7 as it was then, and SABC. And the person that offered me a lift from where I was ENCA, so I got into the car and went. So it blew up. Subsequently, what happened was, I met Mr. Nono Letele because they were doing this inquiry into ANN7. He's the chairperson of MultiChoice, I think he still is. So I met him, and we had a discussion at the OR Tambo airport. And he asked me basically, he said, look, over the phone and subsequently, I can't remember what was said over the phone and what was said personally to me. he said, look, Mr. Karim, I don't believe you are corrupt. I don't accept that you did anything wrong. You can call him here. I don't know what he'll say, but that's what he said to me, Chairperson. And I said, he asked me, what do you want? That was more or less it from us. After my statement to the business day and the thing blew up, I said, I want you to apologize to me. I don't care, as I said in my letter to him subsequently. Who cares, Chairperson, in this day and age? Whether you're a minister or a deputy minister, who cares? In the time that I was there, Ms. Norman, there were 4 ministers. Can we even remember them? Does anybody remember? Maybe now if they're watching, they'll remember that I was the minister for a brief period. Who cares? What I don't want, Mr. Letele, and I told him in my letter, so it's there, I don't want my grandchildren Googling one day in this ICT age that their grandfather, who presented himself as a socialist and as progressive, who gave money away, was actually taking a bribe from ETV. I can't take that. I don't care whether I'm the minister or not. All I've got at the end of the day is my integrity. So I want you to apologize. I want MultiChoice to apologize. And you know what? I want you to put an advert in all those 6 or whatever newspapers you did, same size, and retain your view that actually control was ridiculous, expensive, and so on. But don't give me this line that you're representing the poor. You can't. You're a big monolith. You are making super profits. You can't tell me you represent the poor. Even less can you say you represent your consumers whom you charge so much, okay? So he was very conciliatory. He came across as very civil. And to be quite fair, in all the time I exchanged with him, the few exchanges I had, unlike the others, he was very civil. He's a very gentlemanly type. So he then said, well, you know, I see your work in finance and I don't think you're corrupt. I didn't understand how far you would take it. So he went to a board meeting, I'm told, by others, and he presented a case. He says, look, this chap is very upset, only about one thing, as I understand it from somebody else, who gave me a fleeting account of it. He said he wants an apology. So Mr. Calvo Mavela did apologize. But Chairperson, you'll see the annexure, at the end of a long explanation around the controversial ANN7 deal with MultiChoice. That was the focus. He then said something like, insofar as our March 2014 advert suggested or reflected on the minister's integrity, insofar as something, we apologize, okay? And so I'll read to you what I actually say, and then I'm done with this slide, unless you have more questions. So it reads...
Yeah, let's just read that part.
So you refer me,
That's
Ms. Norman, to
paragraph
253.
Yes,
It says, in addition to the above, on 31st of January, during a MultiChoice press conference, Mr. Mavela, the then chief executive, the chief executive now of MultiChoice, apologized to me regarding the open letter referred to above. That's the advert, Chairperson. The statement of Mr. Mavela is attached here to his Annexure 20, and he said, I would like to take this opportunity to confirm that the open letter which MultiChoice published in the media on 16 March 2014 regarding digital migration was in no way intended to cast aspersions on the integrity of the former Minister of Communications. Now here, Chairperson, to tease the Commission a bit, my name is spelled wrong, Yunus with I and Karim with an E. And may I say, Chairperson, if you care to read the annexure, replying to Mr. Andre Duplessis, Pierre, he says, yeah, you see, Karim and what's the guy, Yunus Sheikh, they were buddies in an Italian Congress and so on. So I replied to all of that. You may have seen it. One of the teasing comments I make, sarcastic comments. Anyway, he's YUNIS, and I'm YUNUS. That's another thing that doesn't bind us. We're part of a broader movement. I don't know him particularly. He's a nice guy from what I know, but I'm not a buddy of his. Okay, so I subsequently addressed a letter to Mr. Letele dated February 2018, wherein I raised my dissatisfaction, Chairperson, I still hold this, regarding the apology of 31st January 2018 by Mr. Mavela.
And basically you were saying that the apology was
not
not adequate and
Yes, that's
was
right.
not published in the right forum.
Yeah, Mr. Koos Becker didn't apologize. It wasn't put on the website, somebody
Yes,
told me.
yes.
Nobody even reported in the press and the media to clarify this.
Yes.
I mean, some student might be doing a thesis 20 years from now. They'll
Yeah.
Google that Karim was in the power of ETV. Mr. Becker has never apologized.
Yeah.
And then I explained what I just said in 256, that, you know what, all I have is my integrity.
Yeah, no, that's
That
fine.
matters to me, and it should to all of us. I don't care about positions,
Yeah.
and therefore you must apologize. I still have that view. You
Yes.
must apologize.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, that's the evidence.
Okay. There may be 2 or so questions, Mr. Karim, that I want to ask you before I release you. One of the things that has amazed me about the digital migration is the delay that has happened because the policy was adopted in 2008 originally, if I recall correctly. But we are in 2020, and the last time I checked, not much had happened. And I would have thought that, one, the president at the time would have been saying to ministers in this portfolio at different times, including yourself, when you were minister, what's going on? What is holding things up? It's taking long to get things done, and wanting to be informed, what's the problem? Did that happen during your term as Minister of Communications?
Well, to be fair to then President Zuma, I had many meetings with him, partly by his prompting. Never once did he say to me that he doesn't support set-top box control, firstly.
Yes.
Secondly, he realized, Chairperson, I should say this, there's a very dismissive attitude in the public domain about the president. There are claims that he doesn't read documents and so on. Well, President, it applies to Mr. Motswaneng as well. The president of the country at the time may not have a degree. He may not even have class 2 education. But I think people underestimate his intellectual and political capacity. They underestimate his firm understanding of the issues. In my exchanges with him, I had a strong sense he knew exactly what the issues were. It's possible somebody was briefing him, but whatever it is, as a politician to a politician,
yes,
he was
he
remarkably
understood the
aware
issues.
of the value of STB control to
Yes.
broadband, and he
Yes.
constantly encouraged me.
Okay.
In fact, I met people who told me what positive things he said about me.
Yes.
But what I want to say is that there were other powerful people who were also saying I'm going too fast, absurdly. Now, my view of the current president and the cabinet and government and the particular minister, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, is they're very committed to move. The point is that we have this baggage that we have to carry. And I think that NASPER's MultiChoice must play a role, because largely it is NASPER's MultiChoice that's responsible for this, and those who identified with them for their own needs, and who are also trying to use MultiChoice and NASPER's as much as NASPER's and MultiChoice were trying to use them. I also think, Chairperson, you rightly raise long-term issues. There needs to be a proper code of conduct, as I say. In my view, I can't prescribe to the Commission, for business lobbying of politicians and politicians' availability to business. So on the side of Parliament, we need to tighten some of these provisions. On the side of business, we need to do that. Because by any measure, the lobbying by MultiChoice was very primitive, very backward. It's not consistent with the social democracy we are, and it's caused a huge setback to the digital migration. It suits them because they can retain their monopoly and so on. So, Chairperson, I would say that the current government, the ANC today, which retains its view on set-top box control, I think they're on the right course. And as an MP, I will play whatever role I can, though I'm out of this space. But they are on the right course. But they have to move faster in all our interests.
Well, you may or may not be able to deal with this, but I ask anyway. At a certain stage, and I think it was after your term as minister, the policy that was pursued by the Minister of Communications, Ms. Mutambi, I seem to have got the impression that it was not consistent with the ANC policy on digital migration. And it may not have been consistent with government policy as it was when you were Minister of Communications. One or two of these might not be correct, but you can comment to the best of your recollection or understanding.
Firstly, Chairperson, it's not for me to comment on a minister's role after I've not been reappointed. That's not really, it's not my thing. But all I can tell you is what's in the public domain.
Yes, yes.
You suggested it seems like the policy that the minister adopted was not consistent with the ANC policy and previous government policy. Well, firstly, in my affidavit, you will see that as recently as about 18 months ago, Mr. Jackson Mthembu, the then chairperson of the NEC Subcommittee on Communications, repeated that STB control remains government policy, long after Ms. Mutambi. There are many other media articles, if the research team Googles, will find, as to my knowledge, Ms. Lindiwe Zulu, in the last fleeting exchange I had with her, had also, she was the chairperson prior to Mr. Mthembu become the chair, also expressed her concern to me privately that, that wasn't consistent with government policy. But she didn't take it more. It was a fleeting exchange in the House. But I should also say, as far as I understand it, Chairperson, and I consulted with some people, the court, right up to the Constitutional Court you served, never pronounced on the legality or otherwise of set-top box control.
Yeah, no, it
They
did
simply
not.
said, does the minister have the power?
Yeah.
It's only today, Chairperson, listening to you, obviously because you were there,
Yes.
I discovered it was such a narrow majority.
Yes.
But there is something, Chairperson, that people out there, I think, should think about,
Yes.
which is, we were never going to give ETV a subsidy. There was no such thing. It's like then saying the government is giving a 7 billion rand subsidy to the car industry, or all the tax incentives we give to business. It's par for the course in developed democracies and here. Their intention was to actually squeeze ETV. They were cooing that they got their way. And Mr. Becker and MultiChoice and Naspers were furious, as if Mr. Becker's moods or MultiChoice's moods must determine government policy. But it was never the intention. Even now people ask me, why did you want to give ETV a subsidy? There's no such thing. It's an absurd, surrealistic claim.
Yeah.
And I subsequently met ETV after the facilitation process ended. And it's recorded in the minutes, Ms. Norman. I met each of them individually as a politician now to strike a political deal since the objective facilitation process. I met Mr. Sheikh and Mr. Golding. And I said to them, I don't know why you guys are claiming a victory. This is not about you. You are fat cats too, of a smaller nature. It's about the new emerging African entrepreneurs, 5 of whom were about to be issued licenses in ICASA. Chairperson, I've explained to Mr. Becker, I can't take the budget and use it as my personal money box and give it to, because I happen to bump. Mr. Sheikh was a comrade in the 80s. Why must I apologize? He worked very hard. He was part of the liberation movement, as you know so well. Now, I hardly had anything to do with him. He's in Amanam Sundusi, Peter Maritzburg. He's in eThekwini, Durban. We served in the same structure, like 600 other activists in that structure. I have never met him since 1994, except fleetingly once at the airport.
Yes.
And firstly, it was very racist, Chairperson. I got a thick skin. We're a highly racialized society. So first, there were people in SABC, obviously, and MultiChoice saying, you see, Karim's agreeing to it because he's a buddy-buddy with Yunus Sheikh. Man, you can speak to Yunus Sheikh. I wouldn't qualify it as a comrade. Hundreds of cops. Secondly, then they said, no. You see, Yunus, it's got the same name as Yunus. I covered that in my response already. Then they said, no, because they're Indians. Oh, please. I'm a Marxist. unapologetically, so Chairperson, he doesn't belong to the same school. Even in the NIC, we belong to two different schools, right? Then they said, no, Karim is not going with Sheikh, he's going with Marcel Golding. Because see, Marcel Golding was a workerist, and Karim is a lefty. Hell, man. Sorry, I don't know if that's the right word. Oh, man, please.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. So when they lost all of that, you know what they then did? You see, it's his advisors. Now, they're obviously playing the race card again. Advisors, what they didn't realize was Stumo Mohapi, let me repeat, Chairperson, brilliant CEO of Centec. The most influential person on me, apart from government policy and ANC policy, was Stumo, who writes notes that are simple and a journalist like me can convert with little editing. Mr. Roy Kruger, an outstanding guy, you know, and then Mr. David Nidri, right, who's a long-term activist in the movement, right, and then Wanda Dlangamandla and Rosie. They were the team, Chairperson.
Okay, no, that's fine.
And I thank them again for their excellent work.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Karim. Thank you for coming to give evidence and to share what you know about this issue of digital migration during your term as minister. Thank you very much for coming.
I don't want to be rude,
Yes.
but if those emails are authenticated, and I have read them,
Yes.
and if I'd only had access to them,
Yes.
my affidavit would not spend me hours and hours digging.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
there. I am willing, if you so need me, it's your decision
Yes.
to come back and give some of the politics
Yes.
of those emails, and I can fill in the events that are making more sense to me now.
Yes,
Chairperson.
yes, okay.
If only I had those emails.
Okay.
And Mr. Didri has to apologize to me for saying, man, Yunus, there's nothing there. But it was there for 5 years. I only saw it on Friday. If you need me,
Yes.
I'm willing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The legal team hears what you say.
Yes.
Once they have been authenticated, I'm sure they'll be in touch with you. But thank you very much. You are now excused.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The next witness, Ms. Mkobo, is present. The only challenge is that one of the implicated persons by her, in her statement, Mr. Dian Olivier, has written to the Commission yesterday challenging some of the minutes that have been given to him. He's challenging that those minutes are not accurate. I have not had an opportunity to deal with those aspects with Ms. Mkobo, but we have arranged that she would go through them overnight. With your leave, Chair, may she be allowed to testify tomorrow morning?
Okay.
But depending on what the Chair says, we can continue with her evidence and then we can do the authentication of the minutes later, because the ones that we've received from the SABC have been authenticated by Ms. Bai. Yes, to save time, maybe we could.
How many minutes are affected by
That
Olivier is a challenge?
That is the difficulty, Chair. He has not, we wrote back to him and we said to him, please identify those that you believe, you say are not accurate. And he simply, in his response, which we got, he simply goes and makes a very broad general statement.
Yes.
So maybe we could proceed and then deal with that later.
Well, if Ms. Mkobo believes that they are accurate,
Yes.
then well, it
She
just
has
depends
attached
how much is involved. Because if it's minutes of one meeting that are something like 5 pages, it's one thing. But if it's minutes of a number of meetings, it might require more time.
Yes. I'm in your hands, Chair.
The situation tomorrow? How do we stand tomorrow?
We've arranged, Chair, with the stream, the law enforcement stream, that they must have a witness ready for tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I don't think we'll be even 2 hours with Ms. Mkobo, because most of the ground has been covered by the evidence of Mr. Karim.
Yeah.
And as you might have noticed, Chair, Ms. Mkobo does have a confirmatory affidavit attached to Mr. Karim's evidence. So she will simply deal with very few matters that only she would know about, and that shouldn't, if we start at 10 o'clock, I believe that by tea time we should be done with her. Yes.
Okay, and then the law enforcement work stream has got how many witnesses?
They had indicated they've got 3 this week, Chair.
But that's this week. But for tomorrow?
For tomorrow, I know that they have one person that Nicholson had advised me that, Advocate Nicholson advised me that that witness is going to be a longish, I think the one that did not finish on the last occasion.
Yes.
I've forgotten the name of the witness.
Yeah.
He is going to finish that witness, but he believes that
Yeah.
he may take a while, but I could verify those facts.
Okay, no, that's
Thank you.
fine. Okay,
Oh.
but you are suggesting that maybe we adjourn for the
Yes,
day,
Chair,
and
yes.
then you can attend to
the
issue of the
this query.
minutes and
Yes,
so on.
thank you.
Okay, let's do that, and then tomorrow we'll resume at 10 o'clock.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
We adjourn.
Thank you.